name just for filing purposes. So
actually spell it. Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
sorry, I know
Okay.
it sounds ridiculous, but in a few years' time, if someone wants to dig through the archives, they know who you are.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's just filing
Yeah.
purposes.
So it's MARKENGLAD.
Great.
So
And
no,
your
no, no.
your job, your role.
So I'm the head of innovation, maintenance, and group procurement at Coastline Housing.
Great. And if you look at me for the interview,
Yes.
it's very relaxed because I'll be editing and using like little bits of what we say, but I'll try and capture quite a bit.
Okay.
Roll it.
Okay. So if you can just explain to me to start with the role of Coastline and why you got involved with the Smartline project at
Yes.
the beginning.
Okay, so Coastline got involved after we'd had some other projects around health and well-being with the University of Exeter. And it felt like the next sort of move was to start to look at how we could put sensors and some technology in customers' homes to really try and establish what was going on in homes, how well they're performing, and whether there are problems in them. And from the previous research, we knew that some of our properties had humidity, some had mould growth in them, and we'd done quite a lot of testing on that. And we all know that that sort of can have an effect on health and well-being. So it felt like a responsible thing to do at the time. And we started talking to the university about how we could get that funding and what sort of project we could actually put in place. And also whether we could bring the wider community in. So there was a bit of an education sort of process through the whole sort of project. So that was at the very early days, and we spoke for quite some time and tried to work out how we would get this data, where we would get it from, which houses. And then we came with some decisions that we wanted the houses to be quite close to each other. And Campbell and Paul, Luggan and Redruth seemed like a good area to target. It has a past with a lot of mining history, and of course mining's sort of stopped. So it's been one of the most deprived areas of Northern Europe for many years. So we knew that we would bump into sort of some properties and some information where customers were struggling with their bills, with their energy bills and being able to heat their homes. So that was going to be something useful, so we could actually sort of challenge that sometimes.
And so just provide a bit of a context around Coastline. What's the organisation and of the scale, the size, and you've explained a little bit about the demographic within Smartline, but just explain yourself as a housing provider.
Yeah, so Coastline's a charity and a housing provider. We provide social housing and we develop brand new properties. We're a large-scale voluntary transfer from what was the original Kerrier District Council. They transferred stock in 1998 and 1999 across to another subsidiary company, or another company that was called Kerrier Homes Trust. And Kerrier Homes Trust then eventually became Coastline Housing. We've got just under 5,000 homes, so we've expanded quite significantly. And we have homes from the Lizard Peninsula across to Falmouth, up into Campbell, Pool, Luggan, Redruth, far as Liscard, Launson, around the Bodmin area we have developed and are developing at the moment as well, and Padstow, Wadebridge, and down in Perranporth. So we cover nearly all of Cornwall now, and we continue to develop. We sort of try to provide the best housing that we possibly can. We've got extra care accommodation as well and supported accommodation, and we also have a homeless centre and various homeless buildings which allow us to help clients to get back into society. And we had some really great success stories where customers have moved into our own homes and other homes and been able to sort of live fairly sustainable lives.
So with the type of projects that you undertook, can you explain to me what you actually did in terms of the number of participants, putting centres into homes, and obviously the importance of the tenants and participants being a part of that research, not just the subject of it?
Yeah, so at the very start of the process, we had quite a large representative group of customers. I think there were around 20 who were really engaged with the business and were particularly keen on looking at maintenance services. So we started consultation with them, asking them, what if we decided to put sensors in your homes? How would you welcome those? And we had sort of discussions around whether it was Big Brother or whether it was something that assists living. And that was really sort of positive. So we then started to look at with the actual project starting. So that was before the project started. We then decided that we would target 300 homes, so we installed sensors in 300, all in the Camborne, Poole-Luggan and Redruth area. And I think at the time, one of the biggest risks was that customers wouldn't want us to put the technology in their homes. But actually, when we looked at that from a mitigation purposes, we know that our customers really trust Coastline. We've had that through customer surveys, which are carried out quite frequently. In fact, some are annual. And they often come back saying that they really trust us as a landlord. So that's a really good starting point. And I think that's probably one of the key things that we had as an advantage. But customers seem to welcome getting involved in a project. And we still have retained, 4.5 years later, we've still got 180 plus homes still engaged in the project and still have sensors in them.
So what's the value been from your perspective of being involved in a project like this?
So I think the first thing for me was always around the partnership. So the partnership to engage with the council was really good from the point of view that gives us some more strategy and it gives us some feeding into policy sort of locally, but also we can push that sort of nationally or the council will. I think the other part that was absolutely critical is you working with the university, because we don't have those research skills ourselves. We don't have that sort of reach, if you like, out into other projects. We don't know of other projects and health and well-being projects that we just wouldn't know about. Those researchers knew about those. They were able to research them and be able to draw some sort of parallels. That would be incredibly difficult to build a team like that from a housing association background. We'd be looking to recruit people that we wouldn't know their skills until they started working with us. I think that was probably the real turning point was once the customers started to welcome the sensors and we knew we had the researchers in the background and the funding stream had come through, it was all secured, and then it really took off. I think in terms of the game-changing time was much later. We collected lots of data and we've got lots of information, but the original dashboard wasn't very useful. We used it quite a lot, but it wasn't very appealing to the eye. And once we started to develop a proper dashboard, that was game-changing. To be able to look at in an instant, be able to see a property or which properties are performing the best and which are the worst, and then be able to ring those customers and have a chat with them or visit them.
Why is that so useful to you in terms of both property management side of things and kind of from a tenant point of view, so sort of looking at stock management? Why is having that snapshot real-time view of all properties helpful?
Yeah, it's really useful from the point of view that we can compare homes. We know the ideal conditions inside a home, the internal environment. We know where it should be. With the dashboard, it allows you to see the properties that are falling outside of those parameters. So that was particularly useful. And from a customer point of view, we'll be able to give advice and guidance to them around their own health and well-being. Some customers didn't realise how humid their homes were. Some didn't realise that they were overheating, which is costing them more money than it should. And some were underheating, which may have been causing them sort of other health issues. So, in general asset management terms, if you can keep a home in a really healthy environment in a home, then that also helps to keep the plasterwork in good condition or the assets in good condition, the kitchen, the bathroom, and it allows us to keep the maintenance levels where they should be.
And so, I guess looking at the technology in the round, what do you see as the potential of this sort of technology? Sorry, my phone. This technology for social housing providers, other housing providers. Where could this go?
So I honestly think that the technology should be installed as normal, should be business as usual. One thing that it really does, and it does very fast, is it allows you to pick your priority homes out. Those who are in the most need. But as a sideline to that, it allows you to start predicting where properties there's something going wrong, where the temperatures aren't sort of quite meeting where they should be. That could be the first indication of fuel poverty. Where customers have turned their heating off traditionally almost weekly on a Wednesday or a Thursday because they were worried about their bills and whether they could really afford to get to their weekly pay, which would then be on the Friday or the Saturday. And we saw some of that coming through on some of the data sets. But we'd also heard about that from the original consultation with customers, that there were certainly quite a few stories about not being able to heat my home to the end of the week. And this sort of debunked some of that, and it did prove some points actually. And I think that the other thing with the sensor data was that it did show that some of those customers overheated their home when they did have the heating on. So by turning their heating down, it meant that they would get to the end of the week and still have a healthy environment. So it has been really useful, and I think that whole customer support mechanism is so important. We can look at a group of properties on a dashboard and pick out the ones that need attention, the ones that need us to sort of help and provide support. And that might be a fuel voucher, it may be a hardship, it may be signposting to an organisation who checks that they've got the correct benefits in place, or one of our own teams, the income management team, to do some benefit checking and make sure that they are getting what the finances that they should get.
I mean, so it doesn't take much for a read of the news to see the pressures that social housing is under, and that tenants, sort of experiences of some tenants. It kind of, from an outside point of view, it could be perceived as sort of, there's the tech, but the tech doesn't sell, or let me phrase it as a question. Can the tech replace that person-to-person relationship side of things, or what's the relationship between those two things?
So I'd always hope it doesn't. I'd hope that the technology will never replace that sort of the personal side of the business. We're here as a social landlord to support people in our homes, and the last thing that we want is for the internal environment to be poor, to have mould growth and other issues in the home, and us not know anything about it. Quite often, I think the press make comments around sort of different properties, and they're always going to highlight the most controversial, which is fine. But quite often, some of those customers are very vulnerable. They may have mental health issues, and actually, general support, day-to-day support is what they need to be able to get them to look after their home, sometimes change their lifestyle completely, but quite often it's not just a lifestyle, it's quite complex. We all have complex lives, we have complex ways of thinking about things, and we have our own priorities. And if your priority is not to heat your home because finances are tight, that's not a criticism. That's something we just need to know, because we might be able to help and be able to deal with that.
And looking at some of the big issues around decarbonisation, it's not something we specifically looked at in the project, but how do you see that the sensor data and this sort of intelligence can actually support those bigger agendas as well?
Yeah, so decarbonisation is the next big thing, isn't it, in housing and across the country and the world. Yeah, so from our perspective, certainly there's a lot of value in using sensors prior to putting decarbonisation improvements on a home, and then throughout the actual work itself and afterwards. It'll show us how well the property performed before and how well afterwards. It'll show us things like how it can retain heat, how long the retention is, but it also allows us to benchmark homes against each other that have had similar work. And there's a lot of benefit in that, because you may find that a property has a slightly different issue with it. There may be water ingress from somewhere under the floor, just for argument's sake, which is actually leading to humidity in the home. And when we do the decarbonisation work, you will be able to see that, because you will know that we've dealt with all the thermal side of things, but actually there was another problem behind it. So I think there's a lot of benefits to be able to prove that the work is successful. And also look at how the customers behave, and whether they can change their behaviour to be able to use sustainable heating systems, and to understand how the ventilation requirements need to be met.
What would your advice be to a local authority or housing provider that's sort of in this space, considering it's a bit of a minefield, it's a fairly new market? Where do you start?
Yeah, so and it was difficult, I think, for us at the beginning, because to be fair, it was a pioneering project in the country, and nobody, I think, anywhere had a project of this sort of size. So we did have to go through a procurement exercise to get our sensors, and that's fine. But I think it's the partnership. That's where you start. You do need to have researchers. You do need to have that sort of education piece. You need to have a business support section in it, much like Smartline has got, so you can support those local businesses who may be able to help in the longer term. But I think then between those partners and maybe the local authority, you can then start to sort of build quite a strong team, which will allow you to secure some funding. Or if you're going to self-fund the project, I think there's a lot more benefit in it from that perspective, so that you can actually sort of prove points, you can research, you can benchmark and make sure that what you're trying to set out to do will get done. I think one of the things with social housing providers, we do lose a little bit of focus sometimes on projects that feel like they're innovative or slightly outside of our day-to-day business. This has been quite interesting because this is a project that I see as being part of business as usual in the very near future.
And that was something I was going to sort of add to that. There's the what been trying to do actually, sort of in my role, is understand sort of where this market is at, the readiness and preparedness. You know, what on a bigger scale, what are the opportunities and the challenges that need to be addressed for this to become business as normal, and you know, what needs to happen next, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it's really around publishing all of the information, the findings, and trying to do that in a way that people can see is completely transparent. I think then there's probably some changes generally. We just need to be honest that some of our houses perform really well and some don't perform quite as well. And the same as some of our customers heat their homes really well and some don't. And some have high humidity and other issues in their properties, and other ones don't have those issues. So I think it's all just really around honesty. The opportunity is there. The technology is coming down in terms of cost, and there is a return investment. You're looking after the asset. The more you look after the asset and the customers in it, then the better landlord that you should be, and your asset should last longer, and the whole health and well-being of your customer base should be much better. So the benefits are there really to be had. It's just how you energize a project and how you get your partners and then really push to be innovative and sort of build on that.
And talking about customer engagement, there's been some research around that through the project. What's your experience and lessons, I suppose, lessons learned about engaging customers? Because fundamentally, it all stands still if your but customers, clients are not willing to allow sensors, their data to be collected. You know, there's got to be some trust there.
Yes, yeah. I think, I said earlier on that one of the things that came through with Coastline is our customers really do trust us, and I think that's been a huge part of this. Without that trust, that's been built up as our reputation for many, many years, and I think without that, then the project was probably not going to take off. I think the other thing is we've been very transparent about everything. We've been really honest, and we publish things that we found when we found sort of different types of fairly controversial things around people sort of drying clothes in their homes, and actually in certain age groups that didn't create a problem in those homes. In other age groups it did, and that may be just down to household skills. And some people find that sort of controversial, and it's just the truth, isn't it? It's just that's how it is. But I think all in all, you've got to sort of look at the project and the customers, consult with them. You can't beat knocking on doors. You can't beat face-to-face conversation. You can't beat having the sensor in your hand and talking to somebody and saying, this is what it looks like. It's not a great big box. It's not whatever. And try to explain honestly what you're going to do with the data, how they can stop. If they want to stop and get out of the project, that's fine. We can do that. And sign people up. I mean, it shouldn't be overly difficult.
Okay, is there anything that you think I've missed or that you'd want to say about the project, about the learning? I'm sort of thinking this is largely for a social housing local authority and possibly tech company. If you were to take this to the next level, what's needed?
Yeah, so I think there are a few messages that sort of come out of it, and I think the first one is around that decarbonisation. How are you really going to prove that you've decarbonised your stock and that the customers came along with you and they can use the appliances you installed, sustainable heating type systems, and that they're having a comfortable life and their health and well-being is good? Because you can't do that without talking to them or having an insight into the property. That'd be really, really difficult. At least the data's real. It's not fiddled with, no one's touched it, it's real, you can see it, you can compare it with others. And it does allow you to prioritise your contact with customers as well. And I think that's really important, trying to keep that contact, because that's how you get to sort of hear what's going on. You know whether people have changed their habits slightly or not. I think other messages for me are, you really do need to listen to the research. You know, we've all got opinions, and particularly, you know, in technical teams, we're technically trained. We understand how bricks and sticks and properties work. We understand how heating systems work and how they should operate. But our customers can't always adjust to those systems immediately. Sometimes they need a little bit more support and a bit more help. And again, that's around sort of, if you can't see into a property, if you can't see the data, then you won't know that customers misusing a system, unfortunately, you know, and by accident, and costing themselves lots of money. The utility costs will go up if you use the systems incorrectly. So that's a huge point, and particularly, again, fits with the decarbonisation. I think in terms of like partnerships, I just think it just needs to be very open and honest. I think you need to pick partners. I think local authorities are really good partners. But you also need to sort of have other organisations who are volunteers, in particular. Volunteer Cornwall have been fantastic throughout. And they've really helped with the door knocking and getting customers on board and then keeping them engaged. And then we've used you know, our own in-house staff who've been involved with our, you know, customer teams, our customer access teams, the technical teams have all engaged in Smartline and all got something out of it. We know which properties are the poorest performing of the properties on Smartline, and we know which are the best. But the poorest performing aren't always because of the property. And I think that's the difference.
And just quickly to ask a bit about the, I suppose, community aspect of the project in terms of the Click and Connect and Community Garden. It can kind of seem a bit of an aside, actually, to the sensor technology and the data. But how important is it to consider, this is what I'm trying to sort of understand, it can sound like a tech project, but actually when I look at Smartline, it's a people project.
Yes, yeah, very much so, very much a people project. And I think, you know, you're right, you look at sort of digital and technology and people sort of shy away from it. And we've experienced that on Smartline. But we do have customers who are interested in their data, and you know, we created dashboards for them and links that they can click when there's something going wrong. So if they've got high humidity, they click a link and it takes them to advice and guidance. And I think that's where you get the buy-in, because they can see a benefit from it and they'll get some sort of understanding from that. And I think it's difficult because it feels sometimes slightly patronising, but it's not meant to be patronising at all. It's supposed to be an aid. It's no different really than having a thermostat that tells you what the temperature is on the wall. It's just that we can have a look as well, and we can really help if it's not at the right place. I think in terms of general digital shift, I think that's going to be much slower than everybody thought it was going to be. Even COVID didn't push all of our customers online overnight. So, you know, that's a pandemic, and we still have quite a lot of customers who don't engage with us digitally. So there will always be some. I think as things move forward over the coming years, as people get older, they're already used to using digital on a day-to-day basis. Today's school children in 40 years' time will be much older, and they'll be using technology, you know, in the way they use it much like they do today. So it is just a bit of just a shift, isn't it?
And would you say, look, final question, I keep saying that, but final question, would you say that the digital technology, sort of using tech, can help support a levelling up agenda? And I mean that in the sense of understanding what people's needs are and identifying support that might need to be there, recognising vulnerable groups. You know, there's the kind of individual, yes, you are not heating your house and we can support you, but there's the kind of bigger picture around equality and equal access to support, etc., etc.
Yeah, so quite early days in Smartline, we supported a customer who has real difficulties leaving her home due to mobility issues. and her lifeline to the world really was the internet. But she had financial issues at the time, so we wanted to keep engaging with her. And I know the customer access team then put forward a plan basically to purchase some internet access for her so that we could continue to engage. You know, it's really difficult. Everybody have very complex, very different lives and have different support needs. And trying to pick out any one is really difficult to sort of say this is going to fix everything, because it's not. But I think overarching, you know, we're just going to try to provide the best support possible in each individual case. And I do sort of always go back to the dashboards, and the dashboards are really useful to sort of slightly segregate different parts of information, those at risk of sort of humidity related issues, so mold, disrepair, and those who are not heating properly. I think the real critical one is when something changes and being able to see the change. So the heating's now off. That when the heating's been used thoroughly and very well for many years, that's where the real value of the projects like this come in, because you can see that change. You know that something's changed in the household, and then it's a quick call or a visit and find out what's going on and then provide support.
And how rewarding has it been to be
Amazing.
involved in this? Can you
Yeah,
explain?
amazingly rewarding. Many years, it must be 9 years ago, I first wrote some sort of documents around being able to view in people's homes from a perspective of using technology. And if we could just do that, then we could certainly help a lot more customers and try to keep those who are most vulnerable or didn't know quite how to use their heating systems. We could sort of support them and make sure they could use them properly. And be able to see that come to fruition, it's taken a long time, but things do. And when the university and I met with Emma Bland and we discussed the project, it seemed like it was really innovative, but it seemed like it was something that would never happen. And here we are, 4.5 years later, it's been running, and incredibly important. And it's a really nice place to be when you've thought of something a long time ago, and then a group of people, very clever people, have sort of unpicked all the bad parts, if you like, and pulled it together into a project plan that's got the right people in the background to research, the right people to make decisions, and then make it all work. So yeah, hugely rewarding.